All right, it is 5:10. We only have an hour slot. Let's get started. Welcome to AVT Core. I'm Jonathan. This is Rachel. We have Magnus being JabberScribe. So if you're remote, either join the Medico queue if you want to speak to us using the protocols we invented, or to have Magnus relayed if you want to do it via protocols some other IETF working group invented. James Grusing is note taker back there. He's doing an Etherpad, so if you want to look, also join and correct any typos he has or anything like that, I'm sure he'd appreciate it. Blue sheets are going around. Make sure you sign them. And we have a Medico remote participants, so when you say anything, make sure to use the microphone so that they can hear you and we can have you on the recording so we can figure out what you said later. Note well applies. Make sure you understand this if you're going to say anything, or stay quiet if you don't understand it. Somehow we got a bit of Chinese over that, but not quite. I don't think that's a big deal. Okay, so now you can understand that note well in Chinese also. All right, so today I'll be starting with this agenda bash. Talking about various of our working group documents that are not in, do not have specific agenda items. And then we'll have 20 minutes for Colin to talk about RMCAT CC feedback draft. And then we'll be handing over to Ronnie to talk about the status of the payload working group, which is our close sibling working group. And then we'll finish with anything else anybody wants to talk about. Anybody have any comments on that agenda? It's a fairly standard agenda. We just copy and paste it from session to session. What's that? AOCB? Okay, so okay. Colin has something to say at the open mic at the end. Okay, cool. Working group documents. A number of things are still in cluster 238, which allegedly will be cleared real soon now. I'm sure that will be very exciting, especially if you're the RFC editor. And LRR is still waiting on frame marking. So first item is multiplex guidelines, which I think Magnus said he has some stuff to talk about. So do you want to talk about multiplex guidelines?
So Magnus Westland. Yes, we finally updated the comments. We're not quite done. I submitted a draft so people could review what we've done so far. There's still, I would wish that somebody looks, and I think includes some of my co-authors, to look at these questions on the mailing list and respond to say, okay, if they have anything was say about those. So.
Hi. Colin Perkins, as a co-author who has, of course, read the draft before it was submitted. I looked at the questions in the mailing list and I looked at what changed in the draft, and I didn't really have anything to add. But the draft seemed like a reasonable response to the questions.
I live to serve.
Okay. This advice comments. I saw the message. Yeah.
All right. So then frame marking. You can tell how long this has been around since it's an AVTX draft, which is a working group that hasn't existed in several years now. Is that Mo coming? Sadly, no. So we thought we were going to do a pub rec on it after the last IETF, and then a bunch of more comments were submitted on the draft, which I asked the authors to respond to, which they did not. So I spoke to the author yesterday, and he swore to me that he would respond to it. I will probably need to nag him a few more times, but hopefully we'll be able to clear those up relatively quickly. If Mo comes in, we will try to get him to commit to that at a microphone. But maybe he's smarter than that and not bothering to come in. And then CC feedback is the main agenda item today. That's it. Okay. Right. Oh, there he is, Mo. Perfect timing. You thought you thought you could wait until after we were switching. So yeah, so frame marking.
No, not perfect. Not perfect timing. We have some edits to make. So Dale had some substantive comments that I think need some edits.
Okay.
A lot of them, a lot of the comments, I think we can clarify and explain. But there's going to be a few that probably need an update to the draft to have clarifying text in it.
Okay, and when do you think you could have that clarifying text?
Hopefully by the end of this week.
Okay.
Before the meeting ends.
Okay. So at that point, do we think it's ready for pub rec, or do we need to?
The authors do. We haven't had much other feedback besides Dale's review.
Okay. I mean, basically, I consider that to be part of working group last call. So I think I don't think there's anything that would require a second working group last call or anything, as far as I know. There's been no major technical changes, right?
No, and there won't be any technical changes as a result of this kind of, it's mostly just clarifying text.
Okay.
The only thing that would have been a major technical change is, one of Dale's comments is basically around giving guidance about how to use these things. And I thought we decided as a work group earlier that this wouldn't provide guidance. It wouldn't be normative in how an SFU should operate. It just gives the tools, and it's up to implementers to decide, because there's so many different implementation options for SFUs. I think it'd be a slippery slope to try to give guidance about how and when to do certain things.
All right. And Bernard is.
Yeah, I just have a comment, which is that the question has arisen as to which scalability modes this is compatible with.
Yes, when you say scalability modes, I think you mean the restriction that it only works for nested temporal layers?
Right, like, yeah, in particular, I meant what I'm thinking about is like if you look at all the weird scalability modes in AV1, surely there's some set of those it would not work with. And
well, as I'm sure you're aware, Bernard, AV1 doesn't plan to bring a payload draft to this working group and does not plan to use the frame marking draft at all. And so there's a separate frame marking used custom for the AV1 group.
The weird thing is that the WebRTC code base supports frame marking, and as AV1 is put in there, we have to figure out how to support frame marking with AV1 anyway, unless it's ripped out. So anyway, in trying to figure out that question, how you would implement frame marking with AV1, that question has come up.
Yes, I agree. It's an issue, but I don't think it's an issue that that this draft can solve. I think it's a larger issue that the Alliance for Open Media would have to bring that into IETF to be able to do something about it.
Ron, you have more, don't go away. I heard that there's not going to be any RTP payload for AV1 because Colin asked me about RTP payload for AV1, so I'm not.
It's complicated.
So Moser, there's no one has been working towards a public draft in IETF on AV1 yet. To my knowledge, no one is working on it, so unless someone in the room knows otherwise.
You guys decided not to do it there, but to do it in your cert.
Well, don't say you guys. Some guys decided not.
Some guys on the board, yeah.
That's an open question too about how would you register or make an IANA registration for some external.
Yeah, what I'll say though is the same questions arise for VP9 even, because the same modes are now supported in VP9. So even if we keep AV1 out of scope, there's still a question about the implications of negotiating it for VP9.
Yeah, I mean, most payloads already supported non-temporally nested temporal layers. So I think they're just the the thing in what frame marking says is if you're encoding in a way that's not compatible with this spec, don't put frame markings on it.
So basically, the real restriction is that in order to be able to understand what's coming in the stream, an SFU would need a lot more elaborate information than frame marking provides, and maybe even more than could reasonably be signaled if the scalability structures are unconstrained. It would not, you basically have to have a full dependency tree of all of the prior frames up until the last iframe, which is unreasonable to signal.
Yeah.
So without constraining scalability format, without having some fixed scalability layer information, it becomes very difficult to have something useful.
I feel like what frame marking just needs to say is this is not capable of expressing every scalability mode that the codecs support. Therefore, if you're encoding a mode that this doesn't support, you must not put frame marking on it. Then maybe that's should be. I might already say that, but we should make sure it does. Okay.
Yes, the draft already says. I think the question from Bernard was, is that okay? Is that too much of a constraint for real implementations?
Well, no, I'm not asking that question because I'm just asking if you can make enough of a statement in the document so at least it's clear what modes would be supported and not. We can figure out what the implications of that are. There are probably lots of situations where the supported modes will be sufficient for a particular application, and then they can turn on frame marking and use it to their heart's content.
Yep. Okay.
All right. You done, Bernard?
Yeah.
I'll dismiss you. All right. So I think that's it for frame marking, and let's get to CC feedback. All right. I think, did you have the tab up? No, I guess no. We didn't do that. All right. So Tuesday, yes. Tuesday afternoon, 3. There we are. And there, and there we are.
You can open a new tab.
You can, yeah, I think so, but we didn't. Hold on, let's see. I think we want to do that. There we are.
Work these buttons.
Will that work? Oh, it even works. Amazing.
All right. I'm glad to see we have a working group chair who knows how to work the Chromebooks, because I certainly don't. Okay, so hi, I'm Colin Perkins. I want to talk about the RTP congestion control feedback draft. This is a draft that is joint work with Zahed and Varun and Michael Ramalho. Certainly these slides and I think most of the changes this time are all my fault though, so blame me for all the mistakes. Okay, so this was discussed at the last meeting. There was a bunch of people, Jonathan and I forget who else, 3 or 4 others were playing at the hackathon in Prague, gave a bunch of really nice feedback on this draft. We had some discussion at the last meeting about what to do about that. And I submitted the 04 version to reflect that experience. You will be pleased to know there are no changes whatsoever to the packet format. All we've done is made a bunch of clarifications to the text this time. Okay, so what have we changed? We have added an example of how to use the RTCP feedback attribute on the basis that both myself and at least one of the implementers got it wrong when I was writing the draft and when it was being implemented. Hopefully what is on the slide is now correct and everyone agrees that that's the right way of doing it. But there's now also an example in there, so hopefully people will keep agreeing that this is the right way of doing it. We've added a clarification that if you've negotiated FEC or retransmission, then you should send congestion control feedback for the FEC packets or for the retransmission packets, since it's all things which are being transmitted and contributing to congestion, so you should send feedback on it all. We clarified that when you're using the SDP bundle extension, the congestion control feedback signaling matches the rest of the ACK feedback for the RTCP FB attribute, which is identical per payload type. according to the draft SDP but MUX attributes. It's not entirely clear what identical per payload type means. It's not entirely clear to me what identical per payload type means when you have a wildcard payload type, but that's something we should clarify in, I guess, in SDP MUX attributes. And I did send email to the music list about that, but no one replied on that. So, but I will let music worry about that. We had a long discussion at the last meeting about what should happen if the SDP offer includes several different ways of providing congestion control feedback. And the draft now says the receiver should pick its preferred mechanism and use that consistently. And so if you get a re-invite, you should, where possible, reply with the same mechanism. In terms of the actual TCP congestion control feedback, again, we didn't change the feedback at all. We put in some clarifications. In particular, we put in some text that says if you send feedback which indicates that some packets are lost, that is not an explicit request that you retransmit, that the sender retransmit those lost packets. It's just an indication that those packets were lost and this is affecting the state of the congestion. So this doesn't act as an explicit NAC. Right? If you want to send NACs, you should send NACs in the same way. Equally, it doesn't prohibit the sender from retransmitting those lost packets if it has negotiated a retransmission packet format, but it doesn't explicitly require it. So, as usual, a sender, if you have retransmission enabled, can choose to retransmit any or all of the packets, it feels like. And we put in a clarification that if you configure your RTCP bandwidth fraction weirdly, you may end up having to generate some very large congestion control feedback packets, and in which case you may have to split it across multiple RTCP packets because it won't fit in the MTU. My advice there is don't do that. Configure your RTCP bandwidth fractions. So you've got enough feedback bandwidth to send the reports more often, and it won't be an issue.
Yeah. I think this came up in the hackathon because one side wasn't sending feedback at all, so that the other side wasn't ramping up. So still, basically, one side was successfully ramping up to several megabits. The other side was still stuck at whatever its minimum starting rate was. So it basically was making its RTCP bandwidth its fraction of its media bandwidth, which was still stuck at 50 kilobits or something. So.
Yes. So if you do something dumb with the amount of feedback you're allowed to send, then you will have to generate large packets and it will go wrong. Don't do that. We added a section on congestion response when the congestion control feedback packets are lost. Now, what this says, the important bit is it says that like all RTCP packets, the congestion control feedback packets are unreliable and might be lost. Therefore, if you're designing a congestion control algorithm, you must specify how that algorithm responds to loss of feedback packets. And we then added some advice which says, well, if you just lose one feedback packet, you should probably assume that things haven't changed significantly and carry on at about the same rate you were sending before. If you keep losing feedback packets, you go for a long time when you're not getting congestion control feedback. This is probably an indication that either the forward or the reverse path has failed, and you should be fairly aggressively ramping down your sending rate. And the circuit breaker has some guidance there, which suggests you should stop sending after, I forget how many, but after some number of reporting intervals without getting any feedback. The main thing, though, is that the congestion control algorithm should specify what it should do, and that should be to ramp down fairly aggressively. So that's it. I have no technical open issues with the draft. The non-technical issues, which are still to do, are to add a comparison with the Google draft and explain the design rationale and the various various design trade-offs of the two approaches, and to add some discussion on how you convert between the per SSRC sequence numbers, which this uses, and the unified sequence numbers, which the Holmer draft uses, just as part of the discussion about what's the different trade-offs there. So I hope that we will have this ready for working group last call long before the Singapore meeting. I'm sure we've been here before, but hopefully we're really getting there this time. Ronnie.
Can you go back one slide? So just a question, Ronnie, just a question. Is this a different behavior than if I suddenly stopped receiving RDCP messages? If I don't receive any congestion control?
So if you stop receiving RTCP, you stop sending.
If you address the issue that congestion control feedback packets are lost, okay?
Yes.
But that means that is it different behavior from the receiver of the RTCP feedback than if it doesn't receive other RTCP messages?
I mean, this draft is about congestion control. So
No,
yeah.
I'm asking, why do you do it here, not stating something which is regular, what's the normal behavior in this case?
So RFC 3550 doesn't say anything about what happens if RTCP packets stop.
Do you think we should
Coming
say
back.
something about
I think that's what circuit breaker does.
The circuit breaker draft has some generic guidance. This draft is specifically about congestion control, so it gives some specific guidance relating to congestion control. But yeah, I mean, I think it's generally good practice that if you're sending packets and the feedback stops, it's probably a sign that something is broken, and you should stop sending.
In the very weird circumstance in which you stop getting any CCFBs but get all other RTCP, probably somebody's launching an attack on you. And
You've got a really weird middle box.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Anything else?
So you expect to have that draft out sometime later this summer?
I hope to have the draft out over the summer. Yeah.
So basically before your semester wraps up.
Yeah, before the students get back is my plan.
That sounds like an excellent plan.
Yes.
All right, great.
Thank you.
And Ronnie, how do you want to handle this?
I'll just
Okay. Okay.
So,
Anybody not get a blue sheet? Justin, you came in late, I know. Sorry, I don't mean to pick on you. Mel came in late too, but no, there's two. There's two going around. So there's one. The other one's up here. So Justin has the only one that's convenient to anybody right now. I think Colin was raising his hand for a blue sheet, and I think.
Okay, as in the last meeting, we are just trying to take this opportunity and provide just as information the status.
This doesn't work for PowerPoint for some reason.
The status of the payload working group. The presentation was done by me and by Ali, my co-chair, who is not here at the meeting. Next slide. So since the last meeting, we have RFC 8627, which is the flexible FEC published, which was needed by the RTC web, and we are happy to have it already done. Thank you, Mo. There's the TSV CIS payload that was sent to publication on February, and the AD changed on March, so we are hoping that we will start looking at this one, because there's no other thing. Next slide. So the working group documents, there's the Tetra payload that was registered. This one was strange because it was registered, the payload was registered by a group from ETSI in the middle of our development cycle. The author claims on May 19 that May this year, that they want to proceed, but they never did any update on the document, so I need to ask it again because it's expiring. The JPEG XS, there were comments on the list, and the author will submit a new revision based on the conclusion. That was last messages were from last month. The TTML, this one, the media subtype was registered by W3C, and this document specified the RTP payload for TTML. We had a working group last call, which ended on July 18, but there were no reviews. In the past, before that, the W3C reviewed the document before the working group last call, and they were okay with the text. I'll ask them again, at least to send a message saying that that's okay for them to continue. If anyone would like to review it, it will be helpful. The only working document that's still open, VP9.
So speaking as an author of that, I meant to do a refresh of the document after the last one, but I didn't. But I did talk to Justin earlier this week, and basically he asked me to turn the various to-dos in the document into actually open issues in the GitHub repo, which I have now done. And he says he'll convince the other co-authors who I believe work for him to do something on that. As I was doing that, I realized there was one actual technical open issue, which is that the way we have SLI defined doesn't actually work with the spatial scalability. It may be that nobody cares about SLI. I believe that it's not widely, I don't believe it's implemented in any of the WebRTC stacks, for instance. So the answer might be to say not supported. I don't know if anybody has, if nobody cares about SLI, that's probably the easiest thing to do, because it's obviously, it's a lot easier to add it later if somebody says, oh no, I need it after all, than to try to fix a broken definition. Does anybody have any opinions? Anybody ever use SLI? Throw it out. Yeah.
Stefan Wenger, I don't care anymore. Throw it out.
Okay.
For all I can.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds.
I used to care.
Okay.
So any timeline or something?
On throwing out SLI, and I believe there was another minor change to the draft, which one of my co-authors checked into GitHub, but which I saw. I can rev that this week. The other ones, it depends on how quickly Justin can whip the other authors.
Justin, you ready to Google? I think a few folks on vacation right now who are co-authors, but I think the right time frame would be before 106.
Okay.
I think
Before 106.
Yeah, we all want to get this off our plates. So.
Yeah. All right. And given that it's been shipping in Chrome for like 3 years now, we probably ought to have a respect for it.
Right.
Okay.
Is there an official sort of GitHub repo for AVT Core or organization?
This would be payload, but I don't think we don't have one yet. No, so
we don't
it can
have
stay in as an author.
Because everyone is doing their own stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like every document comes from a different group of people. I mean, it's not like there's some regular people who are working on payload. You come, you do the payload, and you go away from that. Okay, just to say that there are no individual drafted waiting to become for new payloads. So this is all the work that we currently have at the moment. Any questions, comments?
Okay. If not, well, we've managed to finish in half an hour, so go us. Except that I believe that Colin had some other business.
I did. Hi, Colin Perkins. I wanted to finish the meeting with a bit of news.
Oh.
And good news.
Oh.
You'll be pleased to know. I'm sure many of the people in this room, if not all, will remember that this group was originally chaired by Steve Kasner.
Mm-hmm.
And the group was founded, if I have checked my notes correctly, at the 22nd IETF in Santa Fe in 1991. And Steve stepped down in IETF 57 back in 2003, which I think was Magnus took over as co-chair. Yes. You will be pleased to hear that Steve Kasner and Yves Schuler, who founded the Music Working Group, will be awarded the IEEE Internet Award in 2020 for distinguished leadership in developing standards for Internet multimedia and formative contributions to the design of Internet multimedia protocols, including RTP and this working group. So some very good news.
All right, so I believe that's it. So thank you, everybody. We will, enjoy the social and/or whatever antisocial you're doing, and see you all around this week and in Singapore.
Probably we only find one topic. I'm not sure the injection control feedback will be finished.
Yeah, I don't know either, but yeah. Mhm.
Still the only topic. Maybe,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, it depends how much we get Mo to do. Yeah, so, yeah, we might or might not need to meet, but we'll see.
So what exercise do you know?